Hi guys, I'm Chord, welcome back to my channel. Today I show you how to make beat for CN Tower by Partynextdoor and Drake. This beat was made by Keys Masterpiece, Noel Cadestre and Prep Billion. I hope I didn't fuck up half of these names pronunciation. So let's start with the breakdown. It's a pretty simple beat. We have a pad and a bass for the first part, and then a similar progression on a different pad, basses, drums, and a pluck for the second part. So let's start from the intro. I mainly use Serum to recreate all of these patches. It was easier than searching for presets. So the first one is an analog PD sine wave and a saw wave, 2 voices and 5 voices with a little bit of detune noise, and then I have the filter controlled by this one shot LFO. As you can see, is set as an envelope, controlling the cutoff of the filter. I have a little bit of attack and release, and then for the effects we have a distortion, flanger, chorus, delay, reverb, and a filter. They're using this synth to play these two notes, A sharp and G sharp, and then as you can see we also have some melody accents responses in the background. I didn't recreate them because it was pretty difficult. They could be chords or harps from any synth with a lot of effects, or maybe just one-shot samples from sample packs, so it wasn't easy to recreate them. As you can hear, there is also this little crackling vinyl noise in the background. Let's move on to the first pad. I'm using sine waves and FM modulation to create a marimba organ style pad. So the sound design is pretty simple. I'm using 2 sine waves, but the second one is just used as an FM modulation for the first one. So as you can see, the volume is 0. The second one is also 1 octave higher. Then I have 7 voices and 4 voices and detune for both. And then I'm using some noise just to have more attack at the start. We have 29% FM, and as you can see I'm using the envelope tree as a modulation on the level of the white noise and also the FM, because this type of modulation on the FM helps me to achieve even more attack at the start of the sound. Then I have a filter, is slowly moving following this LFO, and then I just have some distortion, flanger, chorus, reverb and filter. So this is the sound without any filter, without white noise. And then I'm just using the filter to cut all the hikes. I also have another layer for this pad. I'm using the classic super saw concept. So we have 2 saw waves on 2 different octaves with 5 voices and detune, a little bit of noise and filter. Then I also have flanger, chorus, reverb and distortion as always. So it's pretty much the same preset as the other one, just with saw waves and no FM modulation obviously. I'm using it just to give more frequencies to the first one, because saw waves are a lot more richer in frequencies than sine waves. So this is the progression. Is the classic Drake style love progression, and to achieve this type of feeling they're using the Lydian mode. So it's a D sharp minor scale, but instead of starting on the 1 they are starting on the 6. So the first chord is B major 7. As you can see we have an inversion of the 3rd, and then we have the 7 here. Then they're moving to the 7 chord of the scale. This is a 1-7 in the Lydian and a 6-5 in the minor. So this is the 7 chord of the Lydian, and it's a minor chord with a 7. And as you can see we have the same inversion of the 3rd. And then at the end they're just shifting the 3rd from a minor 3rd to a major 3rd. And we don't have the 7, we have the root note instead, an octave higher. And then for the last 2 bars they're using the same chords, but they're moving back to the first one instead of using this alteration of the second one. So let's move on to the bass. I made this simple patch using MB saws and a sine wave as a sub, 5 voices, detune, a lot of filter, distortion and chorus. So it's a pretty simple bass. They're trying to follow the root notes of the chords. So we have the B and the A sharp. But as you can see, these root notes are not perfectly following the chords. So the A sharp minor chord is playing on top of the B here, instead of playing on top of the A sharp. So the A sharp is slightly delayed here. And in the second part, we have the same chord, but this time with a G sharp in the bass. Then we just have a snap on the tree coming in. and as you can see, that's pretty much the whole first part of the beat. For the beat switch, they're using the same two chords pitched one octave lower, and then they also have a drum loop that is pitched down an octave. So let's move on to the second beat. We have a simple saw pad for the chords. As you can see, I'm using a saw wave, 4 voices, detune and a sine wave, flanger, chorus, reverb, EQ, and the most important part is the LFO. As you can see, it's set as an envelope and is controlling the cutoff filter to open this way. So we have this type of ascending frequencies sound. For the chords, they're using the same scale, so we are in the D sharp minor, B Lydian mode. So the first chord is B major 7, but this time they're using the second chord instead of the 7th chord. So the second chord is C sharp major. As you can see, we have some changes for the second part, so they're also using the third chord of the scale, D sharp minor. This is like a transition. You're also using the sus2 for this chord to create this tension on the upper part of the melody. So we have this ascending melody to the A sharp from the D sharp, and then they're going back to the C sharp major chord. And then here they're switching the two chords. So they're playing a different chord at the start. It seems like the C sharp major chord, but it's not the C sharp major. In this case, they are going back to the 7th chord. So we have the A sharp major chord with an inversion of the root note. And then as the second chord, we have the B major 7. So this is the first chord. And that's the second one. So the bass at the start is playing the B and the C sharp, and then as you can see, is switching to C sharp and B. We also have some higher notes. For this bass, I'm using two saw waves on two different octaves. A subsine, the filter is cutting at 270, and then I have distortion, chorus, and filter again. Then we have a triangle pluck. I think this part is sampled from a Lil Wayne song. I'm always using serum, a triangle, and a saw wave, 5 voices, detune. As effects, I have flanger, chorus, reverb, and filter. I'm using the filter with the LFO one on the cutoff. As you can see, the LFO is set on off, so it's just following the tempo of the track. And I'm using it to introduce the saw wave sometimes on the pluck in this way. So sometimes you can hear this saw wave in the background because the pluck is playing this 8-note melody. It's pretty much the same interval as the pad here. So they're using the D sharp, the F sharp, and the A sharp. So looking at these notes from the D sharp minor perspective, they are just root note, sus2, 3rd and 5th of the D sharp minor tonic chord. And obviously we also have the G sharp that is the sus4. So this pluck is pretty simple, it's playing this melody, sometimes it's just looping. So let's move on to drums. They're pretty simple, but they are different from usual. So we have this snare on the off beat and on the 3rd beat, and then they're playing on the off beats to create this weird rhythm. We also have a clap. Hi-hats. Triangle. and then open heads. And then for the second part we also have some kicks coming in. And that's all for the second part. So that's all for this video. Smash a like and subscribe if you liked it. I will leave all my link in the description if you want to support me. I have a Patreon page where I upload all the FLPs from my remakes, Instagram if you want to follow me, and Beatstars if you want to check out my beats or drum kits. Bye and see you in the next video.